Okay. So good morning. I'm Szu-Yu from Indiana University, and I'm presenting today on behalf of my co-authors, Shaowen Bardzell and Jeffrey Bardzell, who are there in the audience. So the title of this talk is Symbiotic Encounters, HCI and Sustainable Agriculture. The work joins previous efforts in sustainable HCI to engage with challenges associated with climate change, particularly in exploring ways that humans can better harmonize with nature, as opposed to controlling it, exploiting it, or dominating it. So our research joins the call to decenter human and focuses specifically on sustainable agriculture practices to see how farmers remove chemical compounds to cultivate symbiotic encounters between human and non-human actors. So there are two posthuman theories that we find particularly interesting and inspiring in our own practice to take them on the perspective of decentering the human in design. Very briefly, analyze arts of noticing calls us to notice differently by shifting our attention away from the controlled, human-centric, and systematic perspective to the shifting assemblages and multi-species encounters. A related concept is that of companion species, coined by Darrell Haraway, which emphasizes the species interdependence and calls the cultivation and sustainment of companionship between various human and non-human actors, such as insects, weeds, bacteria, and even those that pose threat to humans. So in this study, we apply these two theoretical resources to support our interpretation of our ethnographic data. These theories help us to construct a perspective that enables us to provide images of how human and non-human cooperative efforts unfold, exemplifying how we might cooperate for mutual beneficial ends. So the work contributes to the theoretical aspect of decentering the human in design. We consider our contribution to be twofold. First, we find possible alternatives to the dominating human-centered design paradigm by making post-human concepts more trackable, grounded on our ethnography. And second, we analyze our ethnographic study with a layer of abstraction concerning how these post-human concepts and our empirical study might bring new perspectives to different research interests in HCI, including potential roles for technology to support symbiotic encounters, as well as the HCI methodology might itself be influenced by this work. So the ethnographic data that we presented in this paper are gathered between June 2017 and August 2018 on two farming villages in rural Taiwan. Common around these sites are the farmers' commitment to explore alternative farming practices as an objection to industrial agriculture. So the farmers that we engage with all abstain from the use of chemical compounds to establish a more harmonious relationship between people, environment, and ecosystem. Through working alongside with these experimental farmers, we gain embodied knowledge, cultivated sensibility to notice differently, and to engage in a symbiotic relationship with plants, animals, microorganisms, and other non-humans in the farm. So for what follows, we offer three ethnographic accounts focusing on symbiotic encounters. The sites include an organic tea farm, a polyculture garden, and an experimental orchard. We started by visiting Greenlight Tea Farm, organic garden in Pinling, which sits on the top of a mountainous area in rural Taipei and specializes in the cultivation of Oriental Beauty and honey scented tea. The farm is founded and managed by Chen Luhe, who is a Pinling native who returned back to the site after retired from Panasonic. So in Greenland Tea Farm, we encounter a particular leafhopper that plays a decisive role in the production of honey scented tea and Oriental Beauty. The insect feeds on the tea leaves and buds, which then triggers a defensive mechanism of the tea tree, and then making it to produce two kinds of chemicals. The first kind of chemical attracts spiders to eat the leafhopper, and the other repairs the damage done by leafhopper. So the second chemical has an unexpected benefit to the cultivation of tea. It actually gives the tea a fruity aroma that is distinct to Oriental Beauty and honey-scented tea. So in this image, you can see the yellow and stunned foliage damaged by the leafhopper. While leafhopper reduce the yield of the tea farm, they also contribute to the production of a distinct honey aroma, making the tea a high-thought commodity. We can say that Oriental Beauty and honey-scented tea is a product of the leafhopper, and their presence rely on the absence of pesticides and herbalizers in the farm. However, leafhoppers are not the only visitor in Greenlight Tea Farm. In fact, removing the use of pesticide also attract many other bugs to the farm, including sting bugs that leave burning marks and tea torix that roll up and damage the entire leaf for nesting purposes. So by restraining his desire to boost yields, the tea farmer Chen was able to engage in symbiotic relationship with non-human actors such as leafhopper and spiders. This new kind of relationship is based on cooperation as opposed to control and conflict. A counterexample to Chen's practice is a recent study that attempts to generate the distinct honey aroma in honey-scented tea by injecting tea leaves with artificial chemical identical to the ones produced by leafhopper in a lab setting. In this scenario, the cultivation of honey-scented tea is purely instrumental and focused only on maximizing efficiency. So to us, what makes Chen's organic tea farm unique is his emphasis on cultivation, one that still involves, to an extent, the attempt to strategically arrange the farm to produce honey-scented tea and Oriental Beauty, but without removing non-humans out of the equation, no matter how unpredictable they are. So next, we travel to a rural farming village in Yilan, where we encounter Xingyan, an engineer-turned-farmer who settled in the village 5 years ago. Here you can see his garden, where hundreds of species of crops, flowers, trees, and weeds grow harmoniously together. It was hard for us to distinguish what is the cultivated and what is the wild. And the garden looks more like a wasteland than a farm at first glance. And Xingyan nicknamed the garden as Cao Cao Liao Shi, which sounds like a Chinese idiom about doing things carelessly. But Xingyan uses this as a play on word, where the phrase actually means to do things with appreciation and care. We join Xingyan on the weeding routine, where we witness how appreciation and care unfold through his unique farming practice. So weeding to him is not about removing all the plants that are non-crops, but selectively targeting species that have accelerated growth cycles compared to the others. Xingyan targets those fast-growing weeds to maintain harmony and balance between his crops and the wild species. We compress the weeds we remove from the field into bundles and pile them up in front of his garden on black tarps. A few days later, we return to Xingyan's farm, and most of the weeds turn brittle because of the burning sunlight. Underneath the tarp are compost soil. It is black, moist, fine, and has abundance of life, such as ants, earthworms, and centipedes. The soil was made from the fast-growing weeds that Xingyan previously removed from his field. So we mix the compost soil and the weeds that we collected a few days ago together, and then add water to it. Water was a catalyst to facilitate the composting process, but not the most important. In the background of the image, you can see a black bucket where full of different fermented liquid inside. Xingyan told us that includes all kinds of fermented fluid because they need vitamins. This lay that he was referring to are microorganisms in rotting liquid, and the vitamins are nutrients that they feed on. So to us, what is particularly intriguing about Xingyan's practice is his ability to notice differently. To him, weeds and fermented spider food are not only not harmful to the farm, but companion species which nourish his crops and heal his soil. In Xinyan's farming practice, there's a dialect that exists between careless and sophisticated arrangement of care. His farm looks messy to the eyes, and yet its wheat and soil management is superior. So our third ethnographic encounter, our first two ethnographic encounters have shown beautiful collaboration between humans and non-humans. But the effort in creating symbiotic encounters not always go so smoothly. In our third encounter, we tell the story of a conflict between Lindike's 6 feminist Creole farmers, their citrus trees, and scale insects which suck sap from the trees and produce honeydew that attract ant colonies, interfere photosynthesis processes, and then threaten the entire orchard. So Lindike farmers told the story of their 4-month battle with the scale insect. It started with witnessing the twigs and branches falling out from the tree, followed by the development of sooty mold covering entire plants. The story ended with their painful decision to use chemical pesticides to kill the scales. Their decision eventually saved the orchard, but it goes against their long-time commitment for eco-friendly farming. The decision of using chemical pesticides is motivated by their love toward the citrus trees, a concern of not having enough capital to sustain their livelihood, and their responsibility towards the orchards nearby. As they wrote in the blog post, "We can no longer bear to watch these fruit trees die. We love them. We lack the courage and strength to watch them die." They continue, "We do not have enough capital to survive 6 years without income. Further, if we don't act now, what happens when the scale infection spread to the nearby orchard, affecting our neighboring farmers' livelihood?" So the battle with scale insect does not have a happy ending. It foregrounds vulnerability of the farmers, where the fate of one species changed the entire ecosystem. What the story have told us is that eco-friendly farming is risky and can sometimes fail. Nevertheless, in its failure, it helped clarify trade-offs and support future decision-making, as they reflect on the post. If we could have made the decision earlier, could we have only had to spray once and reduce the harm of chemical compounds have posted to the land to its minimum? So on the outset, we situate ourselves in the community of sustainable HCI and explore through Posthuman Theories how humans can better harmonize with nature. So what exactly do we learn from this ethnographic study? By working alongside with experimental farmers, we learn to notice differently, to see pests as cooperative tea producers, to consider weeds as companion crops, and while at the same time recognize that challenges still exist in the course of building symbiotic relationships. So in HCI and many other fields, we tend to define the lab and the wild as two separate sides of knowledge production. However, the farmers that we engage with remind us our original lab. The earth with its regular rhythms and patterns support experimentation, A/B testing, and more. The experimentation that I have shown are conducted by small-scale eco-friendly farmers. And we believe that a role for HCI is to encourage this form of participation and innovation. Although the mass majority of their practices won't succeed, it only takes one major succeed to have a real impact. HCI can also help developing tools and toolkits and broaden participation in agriculture, food production, and soil care. Similarly, HCI can create tools that facilitate the dissemination of small-scale and often unnoticed scientific achievements of farmers like Lindike or Xinyan. So the second key take-home is that in all three of our encounters, farmers expressing emotional charged connection with the land, from the tragic style of Lindike's narrative to Xinyan's sophisticated cultivation of compost soil. There is no nostalgic romanticism, but rather reflects an intimacy with the biosphere. We underwent such a transformation ourselves. When we first started the study, we found bugs and worms as disgusting pests to be exterminated. But our time spent shoulder to shoulder with the farmers have changed how we see the soil, how it sustains itself, and how it sustains life, including our own. We now know this differently. We see the soil now as an assemblage of different processes, structures, and meanings. Instead of limiting our inquiry to how technology may help us care for the soil, we should also ask how sensors, microrobotics, and cameras might teach people to see the soil the way farmers do, to foster curiosity about it, and to develop emotional attachment to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Szu-Yu. This paper as well has received an honorable mention, which I will give you now. Please queue at the microphone for questions, and if you're sitting somewhere in the middle, just raise your hand and our student volunteer will send a ticket. Any questions? Thank you very much for a very, very interesting paper. Please go to the microphone if you can make it.
Thank you for a truly wonderful paper. I don't have a deep, insightful question to ask, except that I'm so thrilled to see this paper at this conference. So thank you for that. And I'd like to ask you if you have ideas about how you or the rest of us might inspire this broader concept of thinking about HCI in relation to the other organisms that inhabit the planet with us.
Sorry. So you're asking how HCI may help us to...
I'm asking that from your experience, do you see ways of encouraging others to take this broader perspective to look for HCI's value in these kinds of scenarios?
Okay. So I think one thing that we learned from the farmers is that they are very emotional charged to the land, and we actually go through that transformation ourselves. So part of the presentation we talk about how technology can help others to also see this kind of attachment, and I think that's one way that HCI might help to build this kind of symbolic encounters. And I actually really like that we're right after Sarah's presentation, who also talk about decentering the human in design. And I think that's just another way to think about what if we're not just designing for human users, but we're thinking about non-human users as we're creating our products or technologies.
Thank you. I should have identified myself. I'm Ben Priest, and I'd love to talk to you more about that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So.
Hi. Is this working?
Yeah.
Alex Taylor, Human-Computer Interaction Design at City University. I really like the way that you foreground the damage and non-innocence that comes with these attentions to multi-species relations. But I feel like you're projecting HCI, the potential for HCI as one of hope. And I just wondered what's the counter to that, a recognition that we're continually invested in a program of damage and recuperation, and whether you've considered that in your proposal in the paper.
So I think one thing that we're trying to do very hard is that we always want to maintain help. We know there's a lot of things going back on the back end, but we don't want it to be like the end of the world. We're still trying to figure out what we can help as a community. So that's part of, like in the previous presentation, we talked about staying with the trouble. We need to recognize that there are troubles and there are conflicts, there are limitations of how much we can do, and we also need to recognize that we don't really have an answer as how we might solve climate change. But even though we need to take actions, we need to, if we know the way we have been doing are problematic, how can we change it? How can we learn to notice differently, do things differently? That might have different consequences to our own doings. So I think that's one way we're trying to convey in this paper.
Thank you very much.